Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, November 21st. Dmitry Orlov is here with us. Welcome back, Dmitry.
Great to be with you once again.
Let's get started, Dmitry, with what's going on right now between Russia and Ukraine. Do you think, with this new decision on the part of the Biden administration in terms of the use of ATACMS missiles, is the nature of conflict or the war in Ukraine is changing right now, in your opinion?
Well, we don't know that this is a decision by the Biden administration. They haven't come out and said it. There hasn't been any official announcement. The New York Times said something about it, but the New York Times these days lies a lot. So that's not really something reliable. And then Le Figaro in France carried the story and then removed it immediately, realizing that it's that it's fake news. Since then, it's been sort of bouncing around where it's in this gray area between completely fake news and sort of fake news. But Biden has been refusing to answer questions about it in public. Um, all we heard from Trump, the president-elect, is from his son, who said negative things about it. But again, is it real or not? Nobody really knows. No, no. Let's look at the history of using these ATACMS missiles. First of all, they're pretty old. Secondly, the ones that the Ukrainians got are the oldest ones. They expire sometime within the next, I don't know, 6 months to a year. So they're at their end of life, and they're probably a lot of duds. A lot of them probably don't even fire up. Secondly, these rockets have an inertial guidance system and a GPS guidance system, and the GPS guidance system is no good if you try to shoot something into Russia, because the Russians are incredibly good at jamming GPS at this point. I was in Smolensk earlier this year on a visit, and as usual, I was trying to navigate by my phone, and it kept telling me that I'm somewhere in the woods, and that's typical. And without GPS, these rockets are not accurate at all. And then there's the question of the payload. It's no good for destroying buildings. It's okay for destroying airplanes, which are just basically tin cans. They're made of thin aluminum sheets. But you can't really destroy a concrete bunker with it, or destroy armored vehicles. The best that these ATACMS are for is destroying a beach full of beachgoers in Crimea. That's the most successful ATACMS attack to date last summer. Now, if you look at the use of the ATACMS, this permission to shoot into Russia is nothing, because they've been shooting into Russia the entire time. Crimea is part of Russia. Donetsk is part of Russia. So Americans saying, well, this piece of territory we consider Russia, and this piece of territory we don't consider Russia, means absolutely nothing at all. It's up to the people who live there. And 97.5% of them thought that they're Russian and live in Russia. So that's that. So they've been shooting into Russia the entire time. Now, they shot 12 ATACMS missiles on August 16th of this year, trying to destroy the Kerch Bridge again. They stopped traffic on the bridge, civilian traffic, for a couple of hours, during which they shot down all 12 missiles. All 12. Which at 3.5 million apiece is not such a good deal for the American taxpayer, I would say. So that was pointless. And then traffic resumed. And then what happened a couple of days ago is they shot 6 ATACMS missiles into the Bryansk region of Russia. All got shot down. 5 got destroyed in the air. Then they went poof. They formed a bunch of shrapnel in the air, high above, and one got damaged and crashed. So now there is some evidence that it was actually an ATACMS missiles. There's a face shield on it that's a forensic evidence. So what does it mean that they shot 12 at the bridge and 6 this time around? Well, it could be that they're running out of the launch vehicles, because the Russians keep destroying them. It could be that they only could scrounge 6 rockets. It could be that they fired 12 and 6 of them crashed on the way. Um, we really don't know any of the details, but we do know what the Americans say about the effectiveness of these missiles. 8 to 10% of them reach the target in any way, shape, or form. And that's Americans saying that as a piece of positive propaganda. So it's actually probably a lot less. So what we have here is a very strained attempt to stay in the game. Biden is out. He doesn't know that he gave this order, by the way. Nobody told him. And as he doesn't know most things these days, he's some character who walks out of the bushes, reads a piece of paper, and walks back into the bushes, and smiles when people shout questions at him. That's who he is. You think Kamala gave the order? No, she's too drunk most of the time these days. So who was it? Nobody knows. And that's really the only dangerous thing about the whole thing. These stupid rockets that are expired, that the Russians could shoot down all day if they wanted to, and should actually be thankful, because this will improve the international sales of the S-400 anti-rocket system for them, because it shows how effective they are. Okay, but the only dangerous thing is we have no idea who's in control in the United States. Not a clue. Who makes these decisions? The New York Times editorial board? That's my guess. It's the New York Times gave permission for the Ukrainians to shoot these expired rockets into Russia to no effect whatsoever.
When you look at Zelensky and his administration, let's assume that they said to him to go after this plan of striking deep into the Russian soil. But at the end of the day, they're not, because in their mind there is some sort of difference between the former eastern part of Ukraine and no Russian territory, and Russia as before this conflict. That's why it seems they decided to go after this decision of striking deep into the Russian soil. But at the end of the day, when you look at Zelensky and the way that he's trying to manage the situation right now, or trying to attack Russia, do you think, is there any sort of end in his mind for this conflict? Because the way that they're escalating the conflict, it doesn't seem that they're seeking any sort of off ramp in the near future.
Zelensky's plans are very simple. It's just death. When the Americans have no further use of them, they're going to pop him off and replace him with somebody else, and make him like a martyr and claim that the Russians shot him. That's his entire life plan laid out for you. Now, in terms of what he's planning to do, or his plans to shoot rockets into Russia, he has no ability to shoot anything anywhere. It's American NATO crews that load information into these missiles. And the most that the Ukrainian crew, if there is such a thing, might be able to do is push the big button to launch the actual missile, although probably not, because all the labels are in English and the Ukrainians don't know English that well. None of that has been translated into Ukrainian, because that's just a silly idea. Translating technical instructions into a village dialect is really strange. So it's Americans doing this, pretending, that they're not just puppeteers, that there's some kind of Ukrainian entity that's actually in control. Doesn't exist.
And how do you see the situation right now? Maria Zakharova said that if NATO contingents are in Ukraine, that would totally change the nature of the conflict, and we're going to consider it as an attack on Russian territory by NATO. In your opinion, right now, is NATO considered? You said that nobody knows who's in charge in Washington and who is deciding about all these matters and all these attacks, all these unbelievable escalations that are happening right now in Ukraine. But at the end of the day, do you see that they're going to go after sending their troops in Ukraine? Because they have 60 days, if I'm not mistaken, that until Donald Trump takes power in the United States. And what are we heading toward, in your opinion, in these 60 days?
More confusion and a lot of hot air. Now, in terms of what Zakharova said, she was referring to this document, which I have right here. It's a presidential, oh, wrong page. It's the presidential order signed by Putin, which I have been perusing. And basically, these American attacks on Russian soil mean that this document has been triggered and that the United States is now at war with Russia, with potential for a nuclear confrontation, subject to this document. Now, I've perused this document, and it's actually rather interesting and complicated, but there's a section of it that deals with the government politics of the Russian Federation in the area of nuclear containment. And it says that the politics of the Russian Federation is a combination of coordinated, united by a common principle or common concept, military, technical, diplomatic, economic, informational, and other measures, okay, that in some way rely on the nuclear deterrent to prevent violent attacks against the Russian Federation. So they have a lot of means at their disposal before they actually start shooting nuclear missiles at the United States. If they do shoot something at the United States, they would probably not want it to look like a Russian nuclear attack on the United States. And they have the technical means to do so that the Americans won't know what hit them, won't know that it was a nuclear attack. They'll just suddenly have the entire eastern seaboard, including Washington, D.C., washed off into the ocean. Who knows where that huge tsunami came from? Could be the Russians, could be someone else. Very hard to prove. So basically, the Russians are not to be messed with, and that's the message. The fact that the senile Biden administration at this point, I think the senility is catchy and has spread to his entire posse, if you will. That's a dangerous thing, but what can they do in the 2 months or so remaining? Not very much. They have these rapid deployment forces in Europe and Romania, for instance, in the Baltics. And given 6 months, they might be able to form some kind of an attack force on Russian territory, in which case they will be swiftly destroyed. The Russians are not going to pussyfoot around with these Americans or European troops because, you see, they're very gentle with the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians and the Russians are one people. It's just that the Ukrainians got brainwashed. So they need therapy. And that's generally the Russian attitude towards the Ukrainians. Whereas the Americans are just to be killed in large numbers. And the Russians will have absolutely no qualms about doing that, I assure you. At this point, killing lots of Americans is really on their mind. So I don't think anything will happen. Americans, when they get hit really hard, they go away and they stay away. I'm old enough to remember the Beirut barracks massacre. Have American troops since then ventured into Lebanon? No, they have not. Lebanon has been crossed off the military map of the United States. Don't go there because they kill us there. So basically, it's the same thing. They might go into the Ukraine, get massacred, leave, and cross the Ukraine off the map. Don't go there, we get killed there. And that's the most that might happen.
And the other part of this, the other alternative of this equation in Ukraine is the role of European Union. European countries, let's put it that way. And how did you find it so far? Because they know in 2 months Donald Trump would be in office, and he's totally different from what we've seen so far from the Biden administration. The policies are about to change, but it doesn't seem that they understand what's going on. They want to continue this conflict. They want to go along with the new policies coming from the Biden administration. It doesn't matter how dangerous are these policies. Are they really considering any sort of change in their strategy, in their policies toward Ukraine?
Well, look, Germany doesn't have a government because Scholz is out. They're in the process of calling for new snap elections. They won't have a government in the future that's actually an elected government because they're getting ready to outlaw their second most popular party, which is AfD. France, another major European power, doesn't have a government either because they refused to yield to the people who got elected the last time around. And they're about to imprison or at least uh, uh, push out of the political arena Marine Le Pen, who is a very popular opposition leader there. So there's no democracy in Europe, and you have these zombie governments that nobody knows how to get rid of. Now with France, it's really strange what's going on. The place is really falling apart. With Germany, it's not so much falling apart politically as it's just huge uncertainty. And strange things are happening. Different characters, very flawed characters, all of them are maneuvering. They've pretty much lost their mind because they were Biden's faithful servants, but their master is going away, going into retirement, and the new master is this very strange person who doesn't seem to like them, and so they're at odds as to which master to serve because all they know how to do is serve an American master. So now they're like dogs that used to be walked by one person, and now they're not walked by anyone. They're just released out into the street and allowed to run around. And strange things are likely to happen, but none of them will be particularly dangerous. As far as Russia is concerned, I don't see any sense of alarm about the European Union. And on the other hand, there are these things happening that are pretty funny, which is the United States was forcing Europe to give up Russian natural gas and switch to importing American natural gas, liquefied natural gas. And guess who is the largest natural gas exporter to the European Union now? It's Russia. And where is the United States? It's in third place after Algeria. Fourth place is Norway. So here's this great hydrocarbon superpower, not really making good on its promises, I would say, having wrecked the European economy by forcing it to stop using Russian pipeline gas. Now, at some basic level, all of the BS notwithstanding, the Europeans, especially the ones involved in business and commerce, not so much the financial types because they're in a land of financial vapor, but the manufacturers who are really suffering realize what's been done to them. They've been pretty much thrown under the bus by Americans with this great hope of confiscating European industry and carting it off to the United States to make America great again. That's not working out either, by the way, because peak shale oil and gas is predicted for next year. And after that, the United States industrially will go down, down, down as well. And we'll probably start importing hydrocarbons from Russia, just like everyone else. So there isn't really a good game that Europe can play. And right now, there's all this posturing, all of this nonsense. Um, uh, NATO refuses to give up the ghost, even though Trump has said that he doesn't like it and doesn't think that it serves any useful purpose anymore. Um, Silly things will continue to happen until Trump enters office, and then we might get some clarity.
If we assume that Donald Trump wants to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine, and you remember in his first term how difficult was the relationship between the United States and the European Union and European countries. They were totally not, there were a lot of resistance against him in the European Union. Right now, do you see that would be the case for his presidency right now? And is that going to make the solution for the conflict in Ukraine even more difficult, even more because the way that we're witnessing right now, that they're totally in with the Biden administration in any sort of policy that they're taking. But if Trump wants to change that, is that possible? Is it going to happen in their mind? Because they have to decide about these things, and we know the history of Donald Trump with the European Union.
Well, during his first term, Trump was really surprised that he won, and was just completely unprepared to assume the reins of power in Washington. Never done anything similar. He thought that it was all just posing for the cameras and saying things and shaking hands, etc. He didn't know that there was a lot of bureaucracy involved. That was a steep learning curve for an old guy, but he seems to have surmounted it to some extent. And this time he's going to enter office, as they say, loaded for bear. He's got a big team of relatively young people who know how Washington works and who have the ability to absolutely savage the Washington bureaucracy, which they'll be doing. So while they're doing that, will they have any time to devote to the European Union? I would say no. In fact, I don't see any big, huge foreign policy team being put together by Trump. I don't see any Russian experts on his side. Well, he's got this one lawyer who was born in Moscow, but that doesn't really count. He's like this token guy who speaks Russian. Okay, cool, but that doesn't really make make the weather. So I think he'll be just as lost as all the other Americans who have tried to deal with Russia from a position of strength. Sort of like walking into a bear's den in the middle of winter from a position of strength. What does that mean? You get your face ripped off and go home. So Russia is not a country you can win against militarily, and the rest of the planet seems to know that, but the Americans are vague on the concept. Trump is still saying, I'm going to negotiate from a position of strength. At the same time, his proposed head of the Pentagon, the defense minister, says that the United States is decades behind Russia in weapons development. So what kind of a position of strength is that? So they may know how to reform healthcare, although I don't think anyone does in the United States, so that it doesn't eat up a quarter of everyone's taxes, or everyone's outlay. Is 25% is spent on medicine, which is ridiculous. They may know something about other related things, how to sack most of the CIA. Tulsi Gabbard will probably go to town on that. But what do they know about Russia? I haven't so far seen any recognition of any ability to deal with the facts. So I don't think they'll do anything. I think what will happen is that the Kiev government will evaporate. They have the people running the government have other things to do. Some of them have used American money to purchase mansions in Switzerland. Some of them are looking forward to a really long vacation in the Maldives. Some of them have houses in Miami Beach, Florida. You know, they will suddenly all want to spend more time with their families, as the saying goes, and will disappear. And then a lot of the other Ukrainians will head for the border because they don't want to be rounded up by the Russians and put on trial and possibly hung if the moratorium on death penalty is lifted for this particular purpose. All these Ukrainian war criminals. And then the rest of the Ukrainians will suddenly declare themselves to actually be Russian, oppressed by the Americans, will forget how to speak Ukrainian, start speaking their native Russian, and clamor to get Russian passports. And that'll be the end of the Ukraine. And what will go on in Washington while that's happening? Well, that would be a bit of an embarrassment for the Americans. And what the Americans generally do in a situation like that, be it Vietnam or Korea or Afghanistan, is they pretend that they won. They make up some fictional story of great success and stick to it. And since Americans have very little attention span when it comes to foreign countries, and most of them can't find any of them on the map, that works out pretty well. So I look forward to a resounding American victory in the Ukraine, whatever it means.
Yeah, Dmitry, let me play a clip for you that Ursula von der Leyen is talking about their policy toward Ukraine in the future.
Days ago, Russia tried to wipe Ukraine off the map. And for 1,000 days, Russia has failed because of Ukraine's resistance and the sacrifice of your heroes. Today is a day of mourning, but also a day of promise. We promise to keep standing by your side for as long as it takes. You can rest assured that European and Western support will continue to flow. The winter ahead may be scary, but it is in stormy days that true friends show up. And Europe is your true friend. Your freedom is our freedom, and our union is your home.
And do you think that is Europe capable of supporting Ukraine without the United States? This is a crucial point that I think it's most important question right now, because they're just giving some sort of hope and support that it may not exist in the near future.
Well, first of all, I think Ursula von der Leyen is just great. She's a gynecologist and a valedictorian, and she looks really good for her age. So on that basis, I would declare her a success. Now, in terms of Europe supporting the Ukraine without the United States, well, do they have any money left? That's the question. Because if they do have money, the Ukrainians will find a way to steal it. But if they're out of money, then the Ukrainians will have nothing left to steal. That's how it works. Now, it doesn't seem like Brussels has €1 trillion to throw at the Ukrainian problems. Germany doesn't either. And the other thing is that they've already made their cash. All of these EU people have already made their little trip to Kiev on the night train to collect a suitcase of freshly printed $100 bills. Some of them made that trip more than once. They've all done it. So all of this money that the Americans have sent there, quite a bit of it has already landed in the safes of these EU dignitaries. Do they want any more money? Well, of course. Who doesn't want more money? The question is, where is that money going to come from? If it doesn't come from the United States, then it'll end up being their own money, and I bet they won't like that. So they will probably keep talking about supporting the Ukraine, because what else can they do? They can't come out and say, well, the Americans aren't giving you any more money, so we aren't going to give you any more money either. That would make them look bad. It would make them look like they've been fleecing the American taxpayer all along. So they want to come up with a more palatable story, if you will. But they'll just keep talking. That's all they'll do. They'll keep talking. And what can they reasonably do? Well, the French have offered some Mirage planes to the Ukrainians. Turned out that nobody can maintain them in the Ukraine, so that plan got scrapped. They got some more of those wheeled tanks, the silly French wheeled tanks that are designed to really scare a lot of native tribesmen. But the problem is that you could actually pierce them from using rounds from a large machine gun. They're okay against a Kalashnikov pretty well, but anything larger, they get blown up. So the Ukrainians said, no, first of all, these tanks, they get stuck in the mud because they're not tracked, they're wheeled. And secondly, anybody who wants to destroy them does. None of them lasted more than a day or two at the front line. So what can they give to the Russians at this point? The Germans keep going back and forth on these Taurus missiles, which is yet another ATACMS kind of thing, except it's not ground-to-ground missiles. They're air-launched, and they're air-launched from aircraft that the Ukrainians don't have. So what are they talking about? And so, yes, they will keep making that kind of noise, but it will not make one bit of a difference.
And when it comes to Dmitry, to the conflict in the Middle East, it seems that the Biden administration in its final days is trying to do some sort of political move in Lebanon to make some sort of compromise and cooperation, but some sort of political settlement. So far, it doesn't seem that the Lebanese government, together with Hezbollah, are agreeing on those terms that they're putting on the table. But is that related, in your opinion? Recently, we've learned that Israelis are using their elite forces in the southern part of Lebanon. But no positive outcome for them so far. How do you see the conflict in Lebanon? And is the Biden administration going to achieve any sort of settlement before leaving Washington?
Well, that seems extremely unlikely. I don't see how Americans can be even party to that conflict here. You remember the Iran nuclear deal? How many years it took to turn out? And then Trump came into office and canceled it? Well, that gave a key piece of information to everyone in the region, which is don't negotiate deals with the Americans because they canceled them. So that was the last deal the Americans will have ever negotiated in the Middle East. And Trump, I guess, is too dumb to understand how that works. It's not real estate, it's world politics. It's international diplomacy. He has no idea about it. So all I've heard in terms of any kind of a peace process there is these media fakes about Hezbollah being ready to pull back behind the Litani River and demilitarize a certain section of southern Lebanon in exchange for a ceasefire, words to that effect. But that's just something some journalist cooked up or some editorial committee. It doesn't really correspond to what's going on the ground. Now, what's going on the ground is what's been happening all along, which is a war of attrition. So the most significant things are Israel has lost 1 million people out of its rather small population, which is what, 10%, over the past year or so. It is now in a war of attrition with Hezbollah, which has an infinite number of fighters ready to join. Meanwhile, Israel itself is running short, and its effort to recruit the Orthodox Jews to fight, which turned into some kind of a ridiculous soap opera, that has failed. Now they're trying to recruit Ethiopian Jews they've been mistreating very badly because the Israelis are racist and the Ethiopian Jews are black. So they've been given really shabby treatment for a really long time. But now suddenly it's like, oh, if you're willing to go and fight in Lebanon, if you survive, we'll give you an Israeli passport. After all, I don't think there'll be too many takers for that. In their desperation, they're even collaborating with the Germans, with Anna / Lena Baerbock, to recruit some refugees, I guess. Some people from Afghanistan, some people from Syria, some people from Iraq, and have them join the Israeli military as mercenaries. Now you have this idea that some Muslims will join these rabid nationalist Jews, Zionist Jews, to fight other Muslims. You've got to be kidding. I mean, who thought of that plan? Fire that person right now. But what it tells me is that the Israelis are getting absolutely desperate, that they do not stand a chance, given their size, in a war of attrition against Hezbollah, backed by Iran. And so I don't think anything good will happen as far as Israel is concerned. They also have the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads since their last rather ineffectual attack on Iran. Because what Iran said is, we're not in a hurry, but expect it when you least expect it. So Israel is now living in this state of constant trepidation because Iran could hit Israel at any time, absolutely any time, without any warning. And they've engineered that situation themselves. They can't complain to anyone about it. So it's a little sad for Israel, I would say, at this point.
As you mentioned, Hezbollah is backed by Iran and Israel is backed by the United States. But it seems that in the eyes of Netanyahu and his administration, they want something more from the United States. They want them to participate directly in the conflict in the Middle East. In your opinion, is Netanyahu going to achieve that with the Trump administration?
No, but he's not going to get a resounding, loud, clear no. He'll be strung along because the Israeli lobby in the United States is still in place, and Trump still has to have all of these congressmen and senators on his side, and they're all getting money from Arab-Israeli Political Action Committee and various other Zionist organizations. So he has to act like, I would like to help you, but somebody chopped my arms off. That kind of a stance. And oh, how I would like to help you, and I will try to get something into next year's federal budget, if there's money. But hang on there in the meantime, and remember, we'll always be on your side. I expect that that'll be the kind of rhetoric that goes on. As far as the United States joining the fray, what are they going to do? They're going to destroy Iran? I don't think that'll work. They're going to invade Lebanon? Well, I mentioned the Beirut barracks disaster with the Marines back in Ronald Reagan's day, and the Americans, if I understand them correctly, once they get totally thrashed somewhere, they never go back. It's against their religion to be grotesquely defeated and then show up for more. They just don't do that. So they won't go into Lebanon. And so what's left for them to do? Not much.
And the other factor in the Middle East is the changes that are happening, considering the Arab states together with Turkey, as we talked about it before. Is Donald Trump powerful enough in the Middle East, or its dominance is that powerful to influence these countries to make some sort of tremendous help for Israel?
Well, look, Donald Trump is a one-term president. Who knows who's going to come after him? It'll take him a year, given the scope of huge changes that he wants to perform in Washington, to get his house in order to a point where he might be able to actually take active part in international politics. He'll be busy. So after that, he'll have a year until the midterm elections. And because during that time, the U.S. economy is probably going to go into some kind of a very bad downturn. And also fracking might definitively peak, and oil and gas production from the Permian patch will start going down, and it'll look really nasty at the gas pump. Americans are very sensitive to prices at the gas pump. So he'll probably lose the election based on something silly like prices at the gas pump to the Democrats. And now he will have opposition in Congress, won't be able to get any legislation through. And the way it works in American politics is the president can negotiate any international deal you want, and then Congress kills it. And I don't remember how many times that's happened, but that's happened a lot. And everybody knows that that's the schedule. Okay, he's old. He doesn't have too good a grasp of anything. He was there, then he was gone, replaced by some dummy, and now he's going to be back and take over where he left off. Except that he won't be able to push anything through Congress because Congress won't be on his side long enough. Okay, so why negotiate with him? Why on earth would any Middle Eastern power negotiate with him? Also remember his legacy of negotiating the Iran nuclear treaty, and then him coming into office and just throwing it out. So what's to say that he won't negotiate a treaty and then throw it out himself on the next day in a fit of pique? You know, he's unstable. So I don't think that there's any chance of anything good being negotiated with Trump's involvement. I would be very surprised if that happens.
And we have to remember he decided to withdraw from INF treaty, which was so important in terms of our control. And he's a totally different character, and nobody knows what he's gonna do. Dmitry, how did you find G20 and the way they talk about the conflict in Ukraine, in the Middle East, but at the end of the day, how do you find it, the way that we don't see any sort of outcome out of these institutions, out of these summits? And we have a lot of countries, a lot of potential there, but nothing comes out of this.
Well, the shock of the G20 is that it has disintegrated. The people who thought they ran it, which is basically G7 people, they thought that they were in charge of the G20. Turns out that they're a minority and nobody wants to pay attention to them. The world has moved on. And the most important figure in G7, who is supposed to be the most important figure in G20, which is the US president, didn't make it into the group photo because he was stuck behind some potted plant somewhere or off wandering in the wilderness. You know, and then look at what they discussed. There are a lot of economic issues to discuss, right? Lots lots of issues with the fact that the United States is not really able to maintain its reserve currency as a reserve currency. Everybody's selling it. The Japanese, who are supposed to be best friends with the United States, are selling American federal debt as fast as the Chinese, who are supposed to be enemies, right? They're all dumping all this money and buying gold, and gold is going through the roof because guess what? The Americans thought that their gold in Fort Knox would never be used, and so they sold it at retail. Fort Knox is empty, and now there are claims on it. Give us this gold. We don't want your paper. We don't want IOUs. We want the actual yellow metal, and there isn't any. So it's a huge scandal. So that would be something for them to get together and talk about, because that's a crisis. Okay. I don't know what they talked about instead. Not much, apparently. Why is the Ukraine the least bit interesting in that connection? I have no idea. I don't think that they even attempted to resolve anything there. They had no ability to do so. So there's no G20 now. There's BRICS. That's where business gets done. G20 is just people posing for the cameras and saying things that make no difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dmitry, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
Thank you
as
very
always.
much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.